Welcome to this candidates debate sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Marin County. I'm Susan Stompe of the League of Women Voters of Marin County, and also with us is Linda Deere, the timekeeper. The candidates with us today are running for a 4-year term for 2 seats on the San Rafael City Council. The candidates with us are Greg Brockbank, Kate Colin, Maribeth Bushey and Randy Warren. The candidates have been invited to make an opening statement of 2 minutes. We'll begin with Greg Brockbank, followed by Kate, and we'll go around from there. So you're first.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, and thank you all out there for watching these candidates forums. I am Greg Brockbank, and I am running for the San Rafael City Council to support neighborhoods, strengthen environmental policies, and champion locally owned businesses and jobs. I believe I'm the only candidate here that has been endorsed by the Marin Democratic Party, 500 others, including Congressman Jared Huffman, former Congresswoman Lynn Woolsey, 2 state senators, 3 former assembly members, and 2 county supervisors among my 500 endorsements. In my first term on the council, San Rafael joined the Marin Energy Authority, developed the city's climate change action plan, and approved minor league baseball, among many other serious decisions and plans. I think I added to the diversity of voices on the council and asked the hard questions, something of which I'm very proud. I also supported local businesses, business owners fighting an out-of-town big box store. San Rafael is a wonderful place to live and a well-run city, but we need more amenities, parks, special events, and opportunities to boost the business climate. I will fight hard for a balanced city budget, address our homelessness issue, a subject on which I have a significant experience, and I will always support our police and fire needs. I care deeply about my community. That's why I co-founded the North San Rafael Coalition of Residents nearly 30 years ago, and why I currently serve on the Federation of San Rafael Neighborhoods, also Sustainable San Rafael, and several other groups. After 28 years of public service, including 18 years on the College of Marin Board of Trustees before I was elected to the San Rafael City Council in 2007, I believe I have the most experience of the 4 candidates running, and working with others to improve our community is what I most enjoy. So I hope you will join these numerous endorsers, and I hope for your vote. I just want to finally add that I do believe that revitalizing our downtown is a key issue that we need to do. We've done it in the past. We need to do it again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg. Next is Kate.
Thank you. And again, I echo what Greg said. Thank you to the League for putting on these debates and enabling people who can't make it out to a candidates night to come and meet us. So my name is Kate Colin, and I am one of your current San Rafael City Council members, and I'm campaigning to retain my seat. I was appointed in January when Mark Levine won the assembly position. I'm new to office. I bring a fresh perspective, but it's an educated and informed perspective. I was unanimously chosen by the City Council in January for 3 reasons: my civic engagement, community involvement, and background, and I'll touch on each of those. My civic engagement. I was a planning commissioner for over 7 years. But when I was a planning commissioner, I went beyond the normal duties of a planning commissioner, and I volunteered, co-chaired the Climate Change Action Plan, and I co-chaired the General Plan 2020. In addition, I served on other boards and commissions, such as a critical facilities group, as well as a homeless stakeholder. That's my civic involvement. Community. I just don't talk about making a difference. I do make a difference. My daughter was interested in being a Girl Scout when she was in kindergarten. There wasn't a troop at her school. I started a troop and was her leader for 8 years. Same thing for youth soccer. They needed a soccer coach. There wasn't one around, and I stepped up. And most recently, I was president of National Charity League's San Rafael Chapter. That's a mother-daughter, hands-on organization. We do philanthropy work in our community, and at the same time, we teach leadership skills to our girls and our daughters. So in the community, I've been involved. In addition, I have my background. I have an MBA, which I bring my business acumen to the council, and I've been instrumental in helping to ensure that our homeless action plan as well as our sustainable subcommittee plan makes sense and follows processes. I worked for Disney and Nike's ad agency. I have a husband and 2 teenagers, and we live in Sun Valley and have for 17 years. I bring endless energy, passion, and enthusiasm to this position. I love San Rafael and everything that makes it unique. And I look forward to the debate tonight so you can get to know me a little more. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate. Next is Maribeth Bushey-Lang.
Thank you. And thank you to the League for putting this on and allowing us to reach viewers that might not be able to come to the forums that have been sponsored. My name is Maribeth Bushey-Lang, and I'm running for San Rafael City Council. I ask for your vote and your support. I know that San Rafael is a great place to live and raise a family because I have lived here for 20 years and raised my family here. Both of my children have gone to the San Rafael schools, from Glenwood, Davidson, to San Rafael High, where my youngest is now a senior. The reason I'm running for San Rafael City Council is that I feel a responsibility to ensure that the San Rafael families of the future enjoy the great place to live and raise a family that I've had. I believe that strong community is built through resident participation, and I have lived that in the years I have been in San Rafael. For 16 years, I've served on my homeowners association board, during which time we took actions that were unprecedented. We took a group that took the situation and made changes in it, and that's what we did. We completely revitalized our medians. We collected the funds and put the project in motion, and now we have beautiful blooming medians where there once were just weeds. I also served for 14 years on the Planning Commission. During that time, we redid the general plan, and I reviewed countless proposals for different development projects in San Rafael. I also serve as in a professional capacity as a judge with the California Public Utilities Commission. I've been there for 18 years. In that capacity, I make tough decisions about large issues confronting our state. These issues include major rate cases with multi-billion dollars at stake, and result in actual concrete getting poured in the real world and steel growing into the ground. And the most important component, though, is deciding who pays for that. This experience leaves me well qualified to be a member of the San Rafael City Council. I know San Rafael, and I'm confident of our success in the future in bringing economic vitality and preserving what's special about living here. And I look forward to being the 5th woman on the San Rafael City Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Maribeth. The next candidate is Randy Warren.
Well, thank you, Susan. You know, having watched League of Women Voter debates since I was a kid, I can't tell you what a thrill it is to actually be in one. We're very honored, and I thank you for the invitation. My name is Randy Warren. I used to be state treasurer of the Young Democrats and a regional board director of the ACLU in Florida. My wife and I started a business there. It taught us fiscal responsibility. And we built it into a successful company that we were able to move the business and our family to Marin County. Suki and I are in our 20th year of being neighbors with you here in San Rafael. At one point, I was managing 14 employees by day, and I started putting myself through law school at night. I earned a law degree magna cum laude and was law school valedictorian, so now I'm an attorney, specializing in family issues and domestic violence. But for all of the journeys that brought me here, I never thought that I would be the person running for public office. However, I felt I had no choice. You see, the state of California has redesignated our county as an urban zone. They are pressuring San Rafael to convert to urban housing densities, and our city council is not pushing back hard enough. They have approved 5-story high-density complexes from 4th Street to Terra Linda, with tax exemptions that will throw 1,000 students into the San Rafael and Dixie school districts without funding the additional teachers. We're dealing with budget problems, with pension reform. We're dealing with homelessness, rising crime, and the need to create better jobs. The City Council is 1 seat at a table set for 5, and I would add the diversity to that circle to make our City Council better than ever. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. The next phase of this program is for questions to be answered by each candidate in 1.5 minutes. The first question will be Kate Colin, and then we'll go around the tables as we just did, but Kate will be the first person. If you made a list of things that need to change in San Rafael, what would be at the top of this list?
If I made a list of the things I would change in the city of San Rafael, well, I'm happy to say that as a council member, we're starting to tick off the items on the list. At the very top would be, and actually there are two things at the top, is changing the way our downtown feels. We've had a lot of concern by residents as to the street community and the presence and the uncomfortable feeling that people have walking downtown. So the city is working on issues to address the street population. In addition, we're also working on a homeless issue, the entire continuum of partnering and working with and facilitating conversations with our nonprofit providers in San Rafael to ensure that there's transitional housing and there's services for those individuals. The other part of that, which is tied intimately and intricately, is our business economy. And not just in downtown, but throughout San Rafael. By having a strong downtown economy, we will enable people to come here and to shop here, and not just as customers, but the people that are actually working in our neighborhoods and in our community will continue to have lunch and help the growth. So to me, at the top, it would be that. And the next, just slightly behind, is resident engagement. I've recently started, with the approval of the mayor, a new subcommittee that is looking at resident engagement and improving government transparency. This is a place the local government can improve, and regardless of what happens in November, it will go forward, and I'm very happy about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Maribeth?
I really do believe that San Rafael is a great place to live, and overall, there are so many wonderful things here. The one thing that I would like to see us focus our attention on improving really follows on, and is sort of a subset of what Councilmember Colin discussed. Our homeless population, but just one particular subset of it, has a disproportionate impact on our community. To have a shorthand way of referring to them, the people I'm talking about are the chronic inebriants who are in our community and who are on our streets. Now, there are plenty of homeless people that have lost their jobs or have incurred substantial medical bills and are unable to provide for themselves. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the people who are practicing addicts who are on our streets. That's the subset I would like to focus on. And I think one of the things we need to do with that group is to focus on their continued inebriation. The number one thing to do is to, and I believe we fundamentally have a moral obligation to offer rehabilitation services to this group. However, once they refuse that rehabilitation, then it becomes incumbent upon our city government to protect our businesses and our families from them. And one of the ways that we can do that is reduce the availability of easily abused alcohol downtown. I would like to see our business improvement district and businesses come together and, thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. And the next person would be Randy.
Thank you. You know, a recent survey found that 94% of the people living in San Rafael are satisfied or extremely satisfied living here. And I hardly have to tell you the reasons. It's a wonderful place to live. But having said that, we do have a problem with spending and managing our budget. At the same time that you vote for your city council, you'll be voting on Measure E, which is going to raise our sales tax to a level higher than any other city in Marin County, Sonoma, or San Francisco, and lock it in for 20 years. And we have to ask the question, why is it that our government can't make do with the lesser amounts that all of these other governments can? Why are we in such a deep hole all the time? Not to say that we're operating in the red, but we're not able to sustain a proper budget. We've cut our police force down from 105 to 90. Crime is on the upkeep. San Rafael's police officers produce 60% of the bookings at the Marin jail, even though we have only 20% of the population. The sales tax and the other taxes should give the city enough to operate properly, and we shouldn't have to keep asking for more and more. And that's not to say we shouldn't pass Measure E. It's clear the city needs the money. But fiscal responsibility is something I learned from managing a business. When it's your own money, you handle it one way. When it's the people's money, it must be handled the same.
Thank you, Randy. The next candidate will be Greg.
Thank you, Susan. As I said, the city is well run and doing well, and people seem to like it, as the poll Randy mentioned indicates. But there are a number of areas in which we can improve. As I mentioned, we need good local jobs. The trouble with big box retail is that it drives down wages, not just locally, but internationally. And so I think we all ought to support our local merchants more and more. Chains generally circulate 20% of their money. Local merchants circulate 50% of their money. So I think we're better off, again, supporting our local merchants. We need to support our neighborhoods more. When I first was elected to the City Council 6 years ago, there was a lot of unhappiness that their voices weren't being heard in City Hall. I think that changed when myself and another council member were elected, and we've spoken to a lot of community groups, neighborhood groups, and I want to continue to do that if I'm returned to the City Council. We need to strengthen our environmental policies. We've done very well. We have the first climate change action plan in Marin and the first award-winning climate change action plan in the state in the prestigious Beacon Awards program to reduce greenhouse gases. We've received the first award for that. And we need to continue and expand on that because the planet's at stake, one of the most important issues we can deal with. I mentioned we need to revitalize downtown. We need to do that by adding more amenities. We need to do that by adding more special events. And yes, every community has to add its share of housing, and ours, I believe, primarily should go downtown, not only to protect the neighborhoods, who mostly don't want them, but also because we can handle them best downtown. Again, that's more people eating in our restaurants and our shopping in our shops, bringing money into the city and address homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. The next question will be answered first by Maribeth. And this question is, how well do you think that the city meets the needs of San Rafael youth in programs and in places for them?
I know how well San Rafael meets the needs of its youth because I'm the mother of two of them. My children enjoyed the offerings that the city of San Rafael has in child care centers at each of the elementary schools in San Rafael. A little known secret about San Rafael is that it's one of the largest providers of child care in the city. And it's high quality, convenient child care. As a working mother, I would not have been able to work if the child care hadn't been available at the elementary school. It's a wonderful program, and I was very disheartened to hear that right now it's so popular that there's a waiting list. I'd like to see us alleviate that waiting list as soon as possible. The programs also that are particularly wonderful are the summer programs run by Community Services out of B Street. My children went through Camp Lemonade to Camp Blast Off, all the way up to Ultimate Adventures, which is a fabulous program where they put children, though they're not children, they're 13 and 14-year-olds, in vans. Every single day they get vans and they go somewhere great. They go up to down to Great Adventures, up to Six Flags. They go kayaking, and then they have an overnight and they get to go spelunking up in the Sierra and climb in. It's a wonderful place. I think the programs for that San Rafael offers to the youth are wonderful, but they're oversubscribed at the moment, and I'd like to see them expanded. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. Next is Randy.
Susan, would you restate the question, please?
The question is, how well do you think that the city meets the needs of San Rafael youth in programs and places for them?
Very good. Well, I think the programs are rather well run. We have swimming pools, rec centers, we've got tennis courts, basketball courts. These are good things. But the area where I think we need to do the better job is an area where we're doing a good job already, and Maribeth touched on it, and I'll second it. It has to do with childcare. As an attorney who works in family issues, I work very often with parents who have recently separated, and they have children. There's no longer one parent to stay home as a caretaker. And in continuing the feminization of poverty, we have the situation where women who are re-entering the workforce cannot afford to pay for childcare without it being the same amount as they're earning from their paycheck. I think it benefits the city quite a bit if we expand our childcare program to get rid of the waiting list that Maribeth referred to, and help single parents with that incredibly difficult transition of moving into a single income family and having to manage children's schedules and be able to work. Because understand that it's not just a question of being able to have that first job after separation, but being able to take steps towards a career so you can be self-sufficient. And our children are best served when their parents can support them.
Thank you, Randy. Next is Greg.
San Rafael does indeed offer a great deal of very good programs for youth of various ages. Maribeth touched on a few. See, as the first one, we'll all be saying what she said, yeah. I eagerly look at the catalogs when they come out in the mail of all the programs for adults and youth, and there are a great number of them. And on the City Council, we get briefed about what some of these programs are. Community Service does a really good job. We can always do more. The problem is, in the recent economic downturn, we would have cuts and more cuts and more cuts, and community services certainly suffered its share. So in order to restore those cuts, we need to restore more money to the city. Hence, I believe we really ought to focus on bringing more money into the city so we can restore some of these cuts. And I'm going to talk about new taxes. I'm talking about, again, more visitors, more special events, more amenities. So sales taxes and other visitor taxes can pay for the programs which will benefit San Rafael residents. Wonderful programs, wonderful neighborhoods. And we also need to distinguish, though, between county and city services. The county is responsible for health services, although many of the services happen to be located in San Rafael, such as the Health and Wellness Campus, fairly new. But I don't think we should take on some of the county health issues, much as they're needed, as a city program. But let's focus on the recreation programs we do so well, and generally just involve more and more people to have a healthier and healthier attitude, and neighborhoods and city programs, as we already do, but we can do them better, particularly with more money.
Thank you, Greg. Next is Kate.
Thank you. I think the city meets the needs of our youth in an appropriate manner. As Maribeth already mentioned, we get to quote her again, the city does a wonderful job at the preschool level, and we're the #1 child care provider in San Rafael. And so the question, I'm sure, when you say youth, goes up to high school students, middle school, and high school. Our summer camps have excellent programs for middle school students. The pool at Terra Linda draws in the youth. But the reality is, many of the youth programs that we all fondly remember growing up with, and we think, oh, it should be like when we were kids, the reality is kids have a lot more choices today. They have their sports clubs that they're involved in, they have after-school programs, maybe they're a musician, and they spend a lot of their after-school time doing that or working on homework. And the reality is, as a city had those programs, kids weren't signing up for them. And so, smartly and appropriately, the city has really focused on the areas where it can give back to the community and offer programs that are appropriate. And that's at the child care and at the younger ages. And actually we have an incredible adult program, which was not part of the question, but that is another place that the city really focuses their effort. So to me, if there was a need that needed to be filled, and there was, let's say, a nonprofit that said, hey, we could partner with the city to fill this niche, absolutely explore it. But until then, I wouldn't start creating programs just to create them because we think they're needed. We really need to respond to the community.
Thank you, Kate. The next question will be answered first by Randy. And this question is about PDAs, priority development areas. Do you feel there's been enough public discussion? And do you, or did you, support these designations, and why?
I do think there's been quite a lot of discussion, and I think it's admirable how the community has fully vetted this issue. I do not support PDAs for San Rafael, or for Marin County for that matter. I think PDAs have a real chance for success in Alameda and other counties that have 1 million or more people and have BART or Caltrain. Marin County is an anomaly. We're a little peninsula overhanging a major city, but we only have 16% of our land developed and the rest is protected, and that is how it should be. When we take on a PDA, we are doing it by our own choice as a city, but at the same time we are yielding certain control to the state. We are taking the state's money as the bonus for creating the PDA, but continuing legislation that comes out of Sacramento lays the groundwork for the state and for unelected agencies to take control of the areas that we have as PDAs. And for this reason, I think it is too dangerous or unwise for the city to have PDAs in San Rafael. The Civic Center PDA will most likely be rescinded on Monday, September 16th, perhaps after you're viewing this. The downtown PDA also needs to go.
Thank you. Greg?
Well, I was on the city council. In fact, I was San Rafael's representative on ABAG when we did designate the two areas as priority development areas as part of the then emerging Plan Bay Area. I believe Plan Bay Area was a good idea because for decades our method of growth, which was always inevitable, contrary to what people would like to have perhaps, has been by sprawl. Sprawl is not good environmentally, it is not good for community, it is not good for a whole host of reasons. So the idea was to concentrate growth in and along transit corridors that would be more community friendly, more transit friendly, more bike and pedestrian friendly, and reduce greenhouse gases. What's not to like? Well, there wasn't any significant opposition until the last year or so, several months after this process began. The opposition, I think, is based primarily on a lot of misinformation and unreasonable fear. People who think that there's a loss of local control. There isn't. People who feel there's going to be excessive development as a result of this. There isn't. We already knew that transit-oriented development was a good idea, which is why we were already planning this around the downtown smart station and bus station. In fact, the zoning is already in place for that and has been for a while. Around the Civic Center, there's a lot of empty parking lots. There's already 3- and 4-story office buildings. And the idea is that we really need more housing. We've had a jobs housing imbalance for decades, and it's getting worse. And to meet the needs of youth and seniors that increasingly want not car-driven lifestyles, but more community, this is to meet their needs. So I think it was a good idea to have PDAs, and I think it's a mistake to rescind them just because some people fear and then some elected officials fear that, oh my gosh, it's going to bring excessive development and density. It won't.
Thank you, Greg. Next is Kate.
So PDAs, or Priority Development Areas, is a designation that is through the Plan Bay Area. Plan Bay Area is a regional plan that was designed to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And it is a plan that was applied to the entire region. I'm proud to say that San Rafael has actually been a leader in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions through the adoption of our Climate Change Action Plan prior to any other, well, the majority of jurisdictions in Marin County. As a planning commissioner, I understand the importance of long-range planning, and we need more affordable housing in San Rafael. Our residents feel the same way. PDAs, in this case, I believe, don't get us there. And just as part of the process, being that I'm on the council, there's a formal vote on it next week, the 16th. I don't know when you'll be viewing this. And until that point, I'll just reiterate what we talked about in the study session, which was last week. And that was my concern about local involvement. Which complicates the issue is we have something called the Station Area Plan. That was a community-based effort with many residents, 2-year-long process, and that plan is viable and makes sense, and it looks at potential changes over the years to come. That plan will be more formally looked at next Monday, and of that entire plan, only one of them had any opposition from the residents having to do with density. They've been very clear, and I look forward to having a decision made next week.
Thank you. The next person is Maribeth.
Thank you. The Association of Bay Area Governments is a regional planning agency that developed the Plan Bay Area and created the notion of priority development areas. As a long-term planning commissioner, I know that regional planning perspective can be useful. For example, this ABAG did a wonderful study on sea level rise. And that we in San Rafael should consider this information and goals as we craft our own vision for San Rafael. And San Rafael's vision is very different from the requirements for priority development area. Our vision is focused on our inclusionary housing ordinance, and that sets forth a very precise way of accommodating our need for affordable housing. That's why I absolutely support the Council's reconsideration of the priority development area designation, and I commend Councilmember Colin and the current council members and the mayor for their wonderful outreach process and what they have done to bring in the community's views, and I absolutely support their emerging decision to rescind. Although I would also encourage them to do whatever they can to keep any of the funds that are associated with that in any way possible. But San Rafael has, for decades, been implementing its own inclusionary housing ordinance. That ordinance is very simple. Every single residential development that is put in place in San Rafael must include within its confines 20% of affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. So the next question will be about the new downtown homeless program. Is it a success? Do you support it? Or do you have other ideas to help with the problem? And Greg will be the first one to respond to that.
Thank you, Susan. Homelessness has been a problem in San Rafael for a long time, as it is in most other cities. In Marin, it is by far, we have the most homeless because this is where the services are, because we're at the confluence of two major freeways, because we've had an economic downturn for a variety of reasons, but primarily the economy. However, in the last few months, I think we've really turned the corner and taken a number of positive steps. The first of which, and perhaps the most dramatic of which, is the Downtown Streets team. This was an idea which grew out of the Thursday morning group, a group of community leaders that met every week last year and every other week this year that I've been an active member of. And they took a program from Palo Alto, it's been successful in other cities, to get recently homeless or formerly homeless to wear bright colored t-shirts saying Downtown Street Team, give them a broom and a dustpan, assign them a square block, and tell them to clean that block from 8 to 12 in the morning. In the afternoon, they work on their resume and their job search skills. It's a work readiness program. It sends a positive message to the community, and it's very, very good, and I think it will help with the homelessness problem and the perception in San Rafael. Other improvements recently include restoration of the police department's mental health officer, brand new, restoration of some of the downtown foot patrol, brand new, Community Action Marin's care van. We need to have compassion, as I'm sure most of us do, for the homeless that deserve and can benefit from this compassion and help. Often there are family members or neighbors that have been in Marin for decades and grew up here, but sometimes we need a stronger law enforcement response as well for those for whom help is not appropriate.
Thank you, Greg. Next is Kate.
Thank you. So as chair of the homeless subcommittee, I could actually talk for the entire rest of the debate about everything that the city is currently doing. And I'm very appreciative that Greg talked about the background of the Downtown Streets team, so I don't need to fill that in, but that is a new program. I did go down and visit it in Palo Alto before we brought it here, because naturally people had concerns. Is this going to work? Does this make sense? What I saw down there was incredible. The people finding they were self-empowered, and they were having the opportunity to change their circumstances. When we started our program, at first there were only 8. I think it went up to 12. We can go up to 20. And this morning I found out that of that original group, and we've only been at it for 6 weeks, 2 of them already have jobs. I mean, to me, that success rate is wonderful, and one had an interview, so we'll find out hopefully if they get the job as well. So the Downtown Streets team is a very important program. In addition, we have the mental health outreach, and it's actually a position, not an officer. They're not a sworn officer. It's a team that she will go out with a sworn officer. And so that way she is providing a liaison for people that are in crisis. So if they are falling through the gaps, we'll be able to partner with our nonprofits, partner in that we can have a conversation with them to figure out why is this person not getting the attention and the support that they need. The way I look at it, I imagine a wheel. The city historically maybe was out the middle and making all the decisions and the solutions. But now we're one of the spokes, along with Ritter, St. Vincent's, and other providers.
Thank you, Kate. The next candidate will be Maribeth.
Thank you. Focusing on our moral obligation to the people on our streets and focusing on the reason they're there leads me to a slightly different approach. I appreciate everything that the city is doing. I think we need to have those programs ready and available to the members of our street community who will avail themselves of it. I think that's where That's where we're doing a good job. Those programs are there, the detox services are available. We can take a chronic inebriant who wishes to avail themselves of those services and put them into rehabilitation, and it sounds like Councilmember Colin's program is off and running and has a great start. However, there are those who will not participate in those programs, and those are the problem ones that we need to focus on and take a little bit more of a tough love approach. The first thing I would do is focus on the provision of alcohol to these people. I was very surprised, and I've interviewed several police officers and discovered that alcohol is in fact the drug of choice, and that alcohol is purchased within the city limits. I think it's important that our business community let the liquor stores know that what they are selling is imposing costs on other merchants in San Rafael and on the entire business community. We also need to increase our law enforcement approach by increasing the patrols of our open space. In the 1970s and 80s, people in San Rafael spent money buying that property, and it shouldn't be used as an open-air toilet. Thank you.
Thank you. The next candidate will be Randy.
Thank you. You know, Susan, there are several troubled communities all within this one, and not the least of which is the homeowners in Gerstle Park and other parts of the city where the homeless are making it difficult to simply enjoy the quiet of their residence. But the way that we fix this ultimately is to deal with homelessness itself. The programs that the city is doing, and Susan, that was your question, are excellent programs, and I applaud the ones we have. But they're not enough. The biggest problem we have with the homeless is that there's really two different groups. There are the mentally ill and those who are simply down on their luck. But the two groups blend together through substance abuse and alcohol abuse. So the first thing we have to do is emphasize sobriety through encouragement, education, and enforcement. And when we can get them sober, we can start separating who is mentally ill from who is just down on their luck. With the down on the luck people, we can work on helping them move back toward indoors. I think what we need to do is develop a program with our largest employers, Target, Home Depot, etc., and have them reserve a certain number of jobs for the sober homeless to give them an entry-level position that they hopefully can use as a stepping stone back toward indoor living. And when they move on, then open that position for the next person, and let's lower the ranks, thin out the herd of the homeless population.
Thank you, Randy. The next question will be answered first by Kate. And the question is, explain Measure E and whether you support it and what specifically the funds should be used for.
Okay. Explain Measure E. Let me first talk about Measure S. That was passed years ago at a 70% rate, so it was something that our community really wanted, and it provides about $12 million to our budget. We're really thankful that it passed because then October of 2007 hit. And those funds enabled us to still provide the types of services that we wanted. So now Measure S is coming up for renewal in 2015. I get that this is 2013. Any sort of funding measure actually needs to go concurrent with a council race, hence going in 2013. Measure E is a renewal of Measure S. In addition, the City Council is putting to the community the question of, would you be willing to pay an extra 0.25% in order to fund some specific or some general needs, which I'll get into. And just as a qualifier, as an indicator, 25%, that means for every $100 you spend, an extra 25 cents. That would raise approximately $3 million a year, which could be bonded against because the term is 20 years, which has been brought up that that's a long term. But the reason we are looking at that amount of money is for our facilities. If you haven't toured Station 1 on A Street, I recommend that you do. As part of the Critical Facilities Group back in 2005, it hasn't gotten better. I have seen firsthand. If there is an earthquake, and it's not if, it's when, we are going to be compromised position. I do support Measure E and look forward to the voters voting on it.
Thank you, Kate. Next is Maribeth.
Thank you. I absolutely support Measure E. I don't do so lightly. Increasing taxes is something that should be done very thoughtfully and only when it's absolutely necessary. And in this case, I believe it is, in fact, necessary. The extension part is really a fairly simple question. The current funds are being used in essential services in San Rafael, and we need to continue that revenue stream to keep those services going. The additional increment is needed to fund long overdue capital improvements. I was in a study session where the chief of police explained that our 911 center, which is located in City Hall, is in a seismically unreinforced building. So when the big one hits, one of the first buildings to go down might include our 911 center. That's an untenable situation, although strangely enough it might not matter because many of our first responders are also in buildings that are not seismically reinforced, so they wouldn't be able to respond anyway. This overall situation is not something that the people of San Rafael want to continue. That's why I think it's essential to include the extension portion, in addition to the extension portion, to include an additional increment that will allow us to obtain the capital funding necessary to bring our public safety facilities up to the standards that the people of San Rafael expect. Thank you.
Thank you, Maribeth. Now it's Randy's turn.
Thank you. As I said earlier, there is a genuine question as to why San Rafael needs to have a higher tax than everyone else in the 3 counties. And the reality of it is that our present and past city councils and mayors have dug us into a hole where we can't get by on the same amount as other communities. And because of this, we do need to pass Measure E. But I say that very grudgingly, because what we really need to do is to find a way to live within our means. The money that's being raised is for a general fund. We have talk about using it for the fire station or whatever, but it's a general fund. It could end up being used for anything. This city has made very large and irresponsible commitments to pay for smart train construction. And I fear that that is where a good portion of this tax increase will go. I also have a concern about transparency, in that the City Council has not been fully forthright about how it put this measure before the public. It should have been 2 separate measures, one to extend the 0.5% sales tax, and then another one for the 0.25% tax increase. This way, the public could decide the 2 issues separately. Will we extend the sales tax? Absolutely we will. Do we want a 0.25% increase? Give us a chance to vote yes or no, while still being able to support the increase. However, I probably will vote for both, grudgingly, and on the council I will do a better job with how we manage the money in the future.
Thank you, Randy. The next is Greg.
Thank you, Susan. There are some slightly controversial aspects of Measure E, but I'd like to mention them briefly and why I support Measure E anyway, and explain them to those who might have concerns about them. Yes, it's true that if this passes, and I think it will mean San Rafael will have a higher additional sales tax than some other cities, but that was true for several years after Measure S, when San Rafael was the only one with its 0.5 cent. Since then, a couple of others have joined San Rafael, and a few more may this fall. Again, if we get the 3/4, it will again be higher, but only by 1/4 cent than 4 or 5 other cities. Second is 20 years. Why 20 years when some are doing 5 or 6 years? It needs to be 20 years to bond against it, to have a revenue stream, so we can do things like improve our public safety facilities. More on that in a minute. And so I think it is important that people recognize that San Rafael residents have the advantage of a much larger urban center than any other city in Marin by far. I like to say that our downtown is worth all the other downtowns in Marin put together several times over. That's an advantage for us, but sometimes it has some costs, higher police and fire costs, higher other city staff costs. So we've been willing to pay for that. I think we will continue. Finally, 4 years ago, Measure G was put on the ballot because our oldest fire station is 100 years old, others are 50 years old. The dispatch center for the police is not seismically safe, as mentioned. We need to fix these. It lost because it didn't get the 2/3 vote. This only requires a simple majority. Hopefully we can bond against it. Hopefully we can use the money to fix up our public safety facilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. The next question will be answered first by Maribeth. And this question has to do with the employee retirement system. Has San Rafael taken the necessary steps to have an affordable and reliable employee retirement system?
Thank you. I believe that San Rafael has taken some of the steps necessary to have an affordable and reliable and predictable retirement funding system for its employees. San Rafael has an absolute obligation to keep its promises to its past workers as well to its future workers. And one of the things that I absolutely agree with the City Council, that the City Council has already done, is to take steps with our current workers to modify those promises. And San Rafael has taken these steps ahead of the Public Employees Pension Reform Act, commonly referred to as PEPRA. We're leading the way with our workers currently put an average of 11% of their salary each year into their pension funds. That has been going on since 2004. These types of changes have made the current promises much more sustainable to our workers. At the same time, though, we need to be sure that we can hire the very best and finest officers and firefighters for our public safety teams. When we need our first responders, we want to make sure that they are properly educated, properly trained, and properly equipped, and that we have the best people there to answer our calls when we need them in a public safety emergency. So I see a balance between keeping our promises and hiring the best workers. Thank you.
Thank you, Maribeth. Next candidate is Randy.
Thank you. Well, I will also echo much of what Maribeth said. PEPRA was important legislation. It started us on the right path, but it's hardly an end. One of the good things it does, the PEPRA legislation, is it categorizes employees into new employees versus classic employees. The classic employees are those who have dedicated their lives, their careers, and whether we made a good deal with them or not, we have to honor it, even if it was made by people who are no longer with the city government. The new people is where we can make some savings. You know, if you ever saw a summary of the city's general fund budget put on one page, you'll find that just 2 lines on it, police and fire, are more than 50% of all of our spending for the year. It's not to say they're not worth it. We love our police officers and our firefighters, there's no question. But we have a Cadillac spending program, and we could really get by with a Civic. I'm not just focusing on those 2 departments, but citywide. The ongoing problems that we have are there are too many different areas that are worthy and deserving of the money. And we have a choice. We can work on cutting things back in a tough but fair way, or we can raise taxes continually till we have the revenue to afford the lifestyle that we want. Both are legitimate choices, but it's a choice that we as a city have to make.
Thank you, Randy. Next is Greg.
Thank you, Susan. I feel very strongly that it's important that we offer the wages and benefits which will attract the best employees possible, particularly in police and fire, but across the board. Public safety is number one. We all value that. That is the foundation. We did take many important steps towards reform. Randy is correct that we can't touch current retirees. I disagree with Randy that we can change the terms of current employees, even relatively new employees. I just don't think legally we can do that. Maybe if there's a constitutional amendment or something, or a constitutional ballot measure. And some things do need to be done at the state level. We've done a lot, more can be done at the state level, and we have to give some credit to the Citizens for Sustainable Pension Plans for pointing out just how unsustainable a system we have in bad times. In good times, we didn't even have to pay our share because the investments were doing so well, they were paying off all the expenses. But in bad times, we're paying, as the last few years, we're paying larger and larger shares of our ever-shrinking budget, causing us to have to cut services more and more. So we need to continue to make changes. The state PEPRA law last year did not go as far as some people feel it needs to, and maybe it does need more. Our former Assemblyman Michael Allen told me last year when I asked him how many of the governor's 12-point plan do you think that the legislature will pass out of the 12, and he said 13 or 14, implying that they'd go well beyond that. Well, they only passed about 8, so we have a ways to go. We can make some more things. Finally, I do want to hand it to our public employees that voluntarily at the bargaining table agreed to make changes for future hires, which is really all we can do. And we did make some important changes.
Thank you, Greg. And next is Kate.
Thank you. I echo the previous comments made by the other candidates and the importance of having quality personnel. As I mentioned in the very beginning, I have an MBA and I have an understanding of finance, and it's concerning the numbers and the sustainability of these numbers. But the city has enacted some reforms. When Pepper came through in January, some of the reforms were ones that had already been negotiated into place. The police and fire associations have been willing to come to the table and to have conversations. That's really important. That's important for having a solid community that works together. Some of the things that have happened, pensions with the reforms that have been put through, $130 million is going to be saved over the next 30 years. In terms of retiree health, again, some of the reforms, 40% reduction in unfunded liabilities due to some recent changes. In addition, the city is fully funding both the pension and retirement funds out of current revenues. That's a really important approach. We're not borrowing to do that, and that's part of the funding policy that the city approved earlier in the year. We have a new lower tier, and as I mentioned, we have best practices, so making sure that we are looking at our pensions in a way that makes sense, not for our community, but best practices that's working in other communities. This includes transparency. We have a new web page up on the site, a new page up on our website that can give information that residents are seeking. And in closing, we'll wait for the state and more reforms.
Thank you. Thank you to all of you. That ends the question section of the debate. Before the candidates make their closing statement, I'd like to give you some important information about the election. Election day is Tuesday, November 5th. The last day to register to vote is October 22nd, 2 weeks before the election, or to re-register if you've moved since you last voted. Requests for absentee ballots must be received by the election department by October 28th, 1 week before the election. But early voting opens at the Civic Center in room 121 on October 7th. It's on October 7th. You can go to the Civic Center and vote your ballot. If you go to the League's smartvoter.org website and enter your street address and zip code, you will be able to see your own ballot with links to the candidates, issues, ballot measures, and information about the voting process itself. In addition to our website, Marin, LWV.org has many other online resources for voters to research facts and campaign financial information. Now the candidates will make a closing statement of 1.5 minutes, and we'll go in reverse order, starting with Randy.
Thank you, and thank you again for hosting us, Susan. The council member position is not an executive position like a governor. We don't have any unilateral decision-making powers. We simply have one seat at a table set for 5. And what we have to look for in our council members is who do we add to that table that's going to make the total council better overall. One problem we have right now with our existing council is a lack of diversity of vision. The political insiders, through the years, have put their own people onto the council and into the committees, which is how it normally works, and that's okay, but we have a sameness of thinking as a result. And now we have the question, with the 2 seats we have, do we best improve our council by giving both seats to planning commissioners? There's nothing that Kate and Maribeth can do on the city council that couldn't be done just as well by only one of them, and giving the other seat to someone who will expand the diversity of vision within the council. I must point out that Maribeth, as she will be the first to admit, having been on the Public Utility Commission, cannot help the city on matters of the SMART train or the Marin Energy Authority. We need all hands on deck, people who can give full service to the council. I have broad business management and life experience, and I can expand that circle in a way that can make our council the best it could possibly be. Thank you.
Thank you, Randy. Next will be Maribeth.
Thank you. I'll start off with by responding to Randy's comments about me. I can give you every assurance that these hands will be on deck. I am a active and a person with a bias for action. Because of my active involvement in the California Public Utilities Commission, I'm out doing cases and making decisions. Once I made a decision regarding the San Rafael, the judicial canons of ethics as a matter of judicial integrity prohibit me from being an active party on the other side of that decision. I will adhere to the judicial canons of ethics and I will not violate them. But what I will do is be an active member of the City Council. San Rafael is a great place to raise a family, and keeping it that way for the future is going to be my #1 priority. I know that reliable public safety is a core responsibility of our government, our city government, and that will be my #1 priority, making sure that that is there every day. As part of my duties with the Public Utility Commission, I went down to San Bruno, I held the public hearings, I looked into the eyes of people who had endured a tragedy that was completely preventable. And I'm speaking of the natural gas explosion almost 3 years ago today. That tragedy was preventable, and I don't want to ever have to do that again in San Rafael. That's why I will be putting my considerable energy into making sure that we have reliable public safety in San Rafael. That tends to be expensive. I understand that we must also have successful economic development, and I will support that because we need those tax dollars. I know San Rafael well, and I'm confident that we can succeed in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Maribeth. Next is Kate Colin.
Okay. Thank you to the League for having this forum. Right now I could talk more about specific issues, but you've heard a lot and been watching a lot. If you had any other additional questions or interests in my platform, you could always go to my website, www.katecolinsanrafael.com. And the reality is issues change over the years. We're talking about future of 4 years. But let me tell you what won't change. My belief that this is really a public service job. This is the next step in the community engagement that I've had for over 17 years in San Rafael. I have the energy and the passion and enthusiasm, and I've shown it throughout my involvement. To me, this position as a city council member is about engaging residents, facilitating connections, and representing community concerns. I've already been doing that since I've been appointed to the council in January. I've demonstrated my ability to facilitate, engage, and connect. I don't just warm a seat at meetings or committees. If I did, I wouldn't be seeking your support and vote in November. I listen to community concerns and I take action. I get informed, I ask questions. I'm the new type of leader that our community wants and I think deserves. I'd like to retain my seat on the council in November, and I hope that you support me. Thank you for taking the time to get informed and watching this video. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. And the final candidate is Greg Brockbank.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you again to the League. My family moved to Marin 50 years ago this month, and I spent nearly half my childhood here, and my children's childhood was also spent here. I first became active in San Rafael neighborhood groups nearly 27 years ago, and I've never stopped. I have served on, I think I mentioned, several dozen boards. I think that's probably more than the other candidates put together, and I've chaired about a dozen. I too am a very active, super active community member. I calculated recently I've probably volunteered 20 hours a week that's about 1,000 hours a year for 25 years, more. I've been an attorney in private practice with a general civil practice for 28 years. Currently, for the last 10 years, the owner and operator of Marin Law Center, helping mostly Marin people, many San Rafael people with their everyday legal problems. In my prior term on the council, I was extremely active. I served on both of the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members, 2 primary committees, one as vice chair for 2 years. I was on regional bodies like Association of Bay Area Governments, and I was first vice president of the North Bay Division of the League of California Cities. Among my community service, I mentioned some earlier. I'd also like to mention the Marin Environmental Housing Collaborative and the Homelessness Policy Steering Committee I've served on and still serve on for several years. So I have significant experience in significant issues which I think can bring significant value to the San Rafael City Council. We do need a diversity of voices. I think I will bring a more diverse voice that we need, and I'd like to return to the City Council with your help and vote. Greg Brockbank for sanrafael.com is my website, and 717-7056 is my cell phone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all of the candidates. We appreciate your participation, sharing your thoughts and ideas, and to our timekeeper, Linda Deere. And thank you for watching.